go into that area. So can I have any thoughts, any share thoughts? What do people want to hear about? So I can talk about big data, machine learning, how it fits into Internet of Things. I can go through the history of the things. What is that you guys are more interested in, so that we can use the maximum time here?
Yeah. Talk a little about some of the platforms that people are developing on. I know that Intel has a low power platform, Freescale has one, Google has one, I mean,
Okay.
a dozen of them.
So I can talk about platforms, so that's one thing. What else? I need to build my presentation here. Go ahead.
Machine learning stuff is interesting.
Okay,
Yeah.
machine learning, I'll definitely talk about machine learning. What else? Going once? Twice? Okay, done. So there are a couple of rules before we start. So I need 100% attention of all the people here. And nobody should interrupt me in between. I mean, I want you to interrupt me in between whenever you feel like. So this was just a joke. Sorry, I'm not so, okay. So let's start with a little bit of history. Let's talk about big data first. So as the human beings started generating data from the earliest of the times, people started collecting data. And in the most recent years, as we have seen, that there has been a tsunami of data. Data has been generated from social networks, as you might already know. Data is being generated from your mobile phones, smartphones, as you already tend to know. Data is also being generated through sensors and devices. So you have a lot of sensory devices such as thermostat controls. You have industrial equipment where again there are a lot of sensors that test temperatures, pressures, etc. You control, they collect data as well. So there was this talk about Internet of Things, like what this Internet of Things is. Primarily when a lot of these devices were generating data, there was no single way to interact with each other. Each of them had their own silo. So industrial devices were completely separate. Social networks were doing certain things on their own end. Machine-generated data, that is primarily in like data centers and computer industry, were generating Apache logs, server logs, defects, etc. And the computer machines that people were using, that was also generating data. And of course, there was a lot of transactional data, which we are all very familiar with, thanks to the RDBMSs of the world or oracles of the world, which collected those kind of data when you do a credit card transaction, when you do a point of sale terminal transaction, when you book a ticket online or anything along those lines, when you make a call to a call center, that's also kind of a data. When you send an email, that's also kind of a data. So the advent of big data actually emphasized on, I like to go on to, since I have the presentation also, I like to use the presentation as well. Can you click onto the next slide, please?
Oh, crap.
There you go. Yeah. Can you go? Yeah. So these are some of the quotes that kind of describe what people talk about, primarily about when they speak about big data. So if you have any questions about any of the quotes that you see here, please talk to the respective people who made these quotes. I'm not responsible for whatever they have said. I'm just copying pasting. I'm just joking. Please ask me also. I'm happy to talk about them. So it is a kind of combination about machine learning, data, and these are very interrelated. Why I say they are very interrelated is the following. First of all, when the cloud computing came into being, it did following things. First, it made it easy for people to do analysis. Why? Because now you had all the computing power that you could have imagined under your hand with a single access API. So that was the first thing. It gave you the scale. Second thing is, because of cloud computing, to store huge amount of data became very, very easy, right? And very, very cheap. So now you can store vast amounts of data on a cloud storage at a very, very cheap price. Earlier days, these things were not possible. And third and foremost thing was, since you had this distributed computing environment, you had cheap storage, now you can spin off any number of machines and do analysis on that kind of data. So that's what cloud enabled, right? So that was the first point of it. Second point of thing is, initially the focus mainly was in just collecting the data. So you might be already aware of the weather channel that gives you predictions. Okay, tomorrow the temperatures in Austin would be 90 degrees or 95 degrees. The sunset will happen at 8 p.m. or the sunrise will happen at 6:30 a.m. These, if you see, are nothing but predictions. And here I would like to give an example of machine learning. So essentially what machine learning is nothing but you collect historical data over a period of time, use that historical data to form a model that does the following. It finds out patterns that exist in the historical data, uses that to predict the future. So when a new input is given to the model, it predicts what happens in the future. So a classic example that I just shared right now was of prediction of weather details, which you have been seeing all along in the Weather Channel forecast, like whether it will rain or not, whether there will be thunderstorms or not, when will be the sunset, when will be the sunrise, etc., etc. So that's the little bit teaser on the machine learning. Can you move on to the next slide, please? So this kind of slide kind of shows about what are the different levels where machine learning, analytics, etc. is applied when you have all this data. So as you can see, at a surface level, at a top level, which many of the business analysts, product managers, and business people are very familiar with visualization tools. So visualization tools generally tend to focus on things along the lines of, okay, what were my sales in the past, what are my sales right now, who are the top customers who are using my products, who are not using my product, things along those lines. They can also do this thing, what has been the, so if I take an example of Nest. So Nest was a company that was acquired by Google that was in home networking, which primarily used to collect data from thermostats, your electricity devices and things along those lines in your home and office. So certain kind of dashboards that would give, okay, what has been your optimal temperature, what has been the time where you have been consuming the electricity the most, what are the lean times, what are the peak times, and things along those lines. Those are some of the data and analytics that would be available to you at the surface layer or the topmost layer, right? Now, when you go to a layer further below it, the middle level layer is kind of OLAP. So OLAP is more like the analytical layer of things. So what happens is that when you start doing trend analysis, so now that you have collected data, you want to tell how the trend looks like week on week basis, quarter on quarter basis, month on month basis. So you want to start seeing some trends and projections. That's when you start doing aggregation of data. So I would like to fit in Hadoop in this example, what I'm just trying to explain. So how many people here are aware of Hadoop already? Good. Can anyone define Hadoop for me here? I saw a lot of hands going up. See, you should have been careful, you raised your hand. Anyone?
Distributed computing?
Distributed computing. You want to say? Sorry?
It's an open source platform for doing large scale computing with big data sets. It's got a number of components involved in it that people often call Hadoop, but they're sort of file system based products. There's Zookeeper for sort of coordinating. A lot of other things involved in it, but the general gist is it's your big data processing system.
Okay, good, great. Anyone else has any other points? There would be gifts, secret gifts in the end, whoever gives the best answer. Anyone else? Yes.
It's SETI.
Sorry?
Parallel processing.
Parallel processing. Okay. Parallel processing. Let me ask one more question. Does anyone know when was this started? Like, what year was it invented or started? Anyone? Take a guess.
2000.
2000. What else? Anyone else?
So when you say start Hadoop as it is, I think it might have been Yahoo or something.
Yeah,
Because
it's a long
Google
time.
had their own big data, and Microsoft had a similar thing called Cosmos, which
Yeah.
is not the same. But ultimately, they started, and these guys at Hadoop came out and had a pretty good platform.
So he said 2000, and what are you saying?
I'm going to say 2002.
2002. We are pretty close. Anyone? Still, there are more chances to guess. I'm going to prove it. No one? Okay. So MapReduce was a paper written by Google, research paper written by Google in 2004.
I knew it's been a while,
Yeah.
but now you have Spark.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the newer.
absolutely. So 2004 was a time when Google published the MapReduce paper, and Yahoo jumped on it right away. They started an internal project within the company, and why I'm saying this, I have worked for Yahoo actually. I worked for Amazon, I worked for Rackspace, I worked for Yahoo, Oracle. So, but whatever I'm going to say, these are my personal opinions. I have nothing to do with this company. Now I work for this company, Actionable Analytics, which I founded this year. We'll talk about, I'll give a teaser about it later on once I complete my presentation. So Yahoo started building on MapReduce paradigm, an internal project. And the reason why Yahoo started doing it was Yahoo was attracting a lot of visitors to its website. So there is a historical context why the so-called internet companies are considered as big data companies or data companies. LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Google, Amazon, these are the companies that claim themselves to be big data or data-oriented companies, not necessarily your Wells Fargo's and Bank of America's of the world, etc. And there is a reason behind that, because historically you see these are all consumer companies, right? They're internet, they're consumer, all of them which I just named here, right? So they get a lot of traffic through their websites. A lot of people visit their website. They click the buttons there, they visit the website, do certain kind of actions on these websites, and they leave a trail behind the system. And trails could be as such. Like whenever a person visits a website, they leave their user agent information, the IP address, the browser, the session information, etc. They also leave certain other things. So if anyone worked with a web developer, I heard there were a lot of web developers here in the crowd today. So Apache logs, server logs, whenever people click or anything like that, you see those kind of entries as well. So traditionally, they used to write very complex C++ algorithms to just sift through these kind of data and do through this. But once Google published the paper of MapReduce, Yahoo thought, okay, this seems like a pretty interesting thing. Let's start working on a framework that will allow us to do this repeated work very, very quickly and efficiently. That was the genesis of Hadoop. And in 2006, they open sourced it and it became an Apache project by Yahoo. I joined Yahoo in 2009, so I can relatively say I was, since earlier days, I know like what the progress was and how it kind of started. And just to define also, so Hadoop in itself is a MapReduce paradigm. There are other paradigms also that follow MapReduce, but the basic essence is if you have large amount of data, which is mutually exclusive, it is very important, mutually exclusive, right? So if the data is interdependent, then Hadoop is not a good fit. MapReduce is not at all a good fit. That is why when I talk about machine learning, some machine learning algorithms are not good fit for using MapReduce. The reason is because there are some kind of interdependencies. Whenever there are some kind of interdependencies in the data, we cannot use a paradigm such as MapReduce and Hadoop kind of things. So for an instance, let me give another example where you would generally use a MapReduce paradigm and Hadoop. Let's say we want to calculate the average temperatures in Texas. So suppose there are 100 cities in Texas, and we have the historical data of the last 10 years in Texas for these 100 cities, where you have the maximum temperature and the minimum temperature. Now you want to find out what is the average temperature of Texas, state of Texas. That means you have to do a summation of all these 100 cities where you have data for the last 10 years, and you want to find out what is the average temperature of Texas as a state, right? So what you would do is that, let's say you have 100 years of data, and let's say each city has a data worth, let's say, 10 gigabytes, right? So we have 100 cities, you have 10 gigabytes each data for each of the city. What you can do is, now you can apply Hadoop to it, and you can divide the data. So let's say each node in a Hadoop paradigm will process, let's say, 64 MB data. So you can have multiple computers. Each of them will individually calculate the average individually, and a reducer will be there that will collect all the data and finally give you the outcome. What is the average? So here, as you can see, it doesn't matter if I use X number of cities or Y number of cities, if I use Texas for San Antonio first or Austin first or second, it doesn't matter because data is mutually exclusive. I can compute anything anywhere. All I need to do is, at the end, I have to do a summation, right? So here, Hadoop is a perfect fit. Whereas in a lot of machine learning algorithms, it's not as simple as what I just stated. It's not a simple addition or summation of things, and hence Hadoop is not very, very well suited in machine learning. I just wanted to use it to just illustrate a point. So let's move on. So finally, the last layer here talks about is the hidden layer. So the hidden layer is more about, so there are three kind of analysis that you can do. So one is descriptive analysis. The descriptive analysis is what has already occurred, what has already happened. Can you tell me what actually happened? So whenever I talk about, tell me what were the last month's sales, tell me who are my top customers last month, tell me what were the average temperatures of these sensors which I was collecting data from. Whenever I ask these kind of questions, I'm asking of something that has already occurred. Here, what we are trying to do is just doing accumulation, right? So all of us have electricity connections in our home, or we all, I am assuming all of us have cell phones, or we're using some kind of utility. At the end of the month, we all get a bill. The bill is also some kind of analytics. It tells you what your consumption was for a particular thing, right? So similarly, when we ask these kind of questions, this is nothing but a descriptive analysis. So it is just telling you what actually occurred. Now, moving next to it is prescriptive analytics. So prescriptive analytics is, now that you know what has occurred in the past, can you tell me why it occurred that way? Do you see the difference?
Yeah.
One is that you say this has occurred in the past. Now, given that that has occurred in the past, can you tell me why it is happening? And if you can tell me why it is happening, can you also suggest or recommend me what should I do to alter the course that has already happened? So now, when I talk about that, that becomes into the predictive analysis of the thing. So one is descriptive, what already occurred in the past. Prescriptive is, can you tell me why it occurred like that? And predictive is, given this has occurred and this is why it has happened, can you predict what can happen in the future? So this kind of, the hidden layer kind of talks about those prescriptive and the predictive layers of analysis. And it is very, very, can we move on to the next slide, please? And it is very, very imperative that in Internet of Things world, so this is a typical workflow, if you will, how data analysis happens in the world. So as you can see, first of all, before you even start analyzing any kind of data, be it Internet of Things model, be a business solution, be a fraud or risk analytics, you can apply anywhere. In general, this is the model that you generally follow in all these use cases. First is you have to define what is that you're trying to solve. That's the business rules of the business use case. That's the first thing. Second most important thing is understanding your data. So let me take an example. So suppose you have to give examples. So you can do fraud analytics. Suppose you have a lot of sensor data, right? You have point of sale terminals where a lot of credit card transactions are happening, okay? Suppose I'm a big retailer, I have a lot of shops around the world, and each of them have a point of sale terminal where a lot of customers can come and swipe their cards and do some transactions. Now, I am experiencing a lot of loss because once the sale has been made, some customers claim that it was not their card that was being used or it was a stolen card, and I'm experiencing 10% of my margins are just going on into a lost bottom line because it turns out that after a month they claim that they were not the ones using this credit card. Suppose this is the problem that a person is facing. So we are collecting data from point of sale terminals, right? So first of all, one has to understand what are the signals that will indicate if this particular transaction could be fraudulent or not. That becomes your first important point to understand. And that's what is known as understanding the data. It's not only about just collecting the data. Data could be random number of things. It can have name of a person, address of a person, how much amount of quantity that person purchased, when did he purchase that, what is the age, name, location, race, gender, this, that. Data could be n number of things. Not everything is made equal, right? All data will not signify whether this transaction could be a fraudulent transaction or not. So it is very important to understand what are the signals that are important for you to capture and what are the signals that are not as relevant. So that's also very relevant in the machine learning world. Moving on to the second step is data preparation. So as I said, there could be 10,000 different things that you can capture. But not everything will be equally made and not everything will indicate what you really want to predict. So you will do we call it as feature selection in machine learning world, where you identify what are the key features that identify what you want to predict. That comes into this layer. Modeling layer is nothing but actually building a predictive model using any kind of machine learning algorithms. There are very well-known standardized algorithms such as SVMs, random forests, decision trees, etc., etc., that is readily available in the market, both in open source worlds as well as in the productized version. Very well-known software that is used for predictive modeling traditionally has been SAS that people use on a regular basis, but it's pretty expensive. And then you also have tools from different kind of companies like SAP, Microsoft, Oracle also have some kind of predictive software. IBM has something known as SPSS. That's also they have. So pretty much everyone has those kind of software. If you go on to the open source world, you have Mahout, Weka, BigML. These are some of the things that are available in the open source world, wherein again you can do predictive modeling. Finally, if you see after modeling, there is a layer of evaluation. Evaluation is very, very important. So when I say prediction, so suppose I predict tomorrow, so suppose today it rained, right? I don't know if we would have seen yesterday, there are 80% chances that it will rain tomorrow in Austin, right? So now we know today it rained in Austin. So our prediction was accurate here. But think if it did not rain, then this would have been a wrong prediction. So evaluation actually tells out how many times we have been correct, how many times we have been wrong. So this is what the evaluation does. Whenever you predict certain things, you kind of measure how many times it has been correct or how many times it has not been correct. And finally, once you get to a level wherein you are happy about the accuracy that the system has given, then you can deploy this model. So this process kind of continues again and again with your data, and as it is known as machine learning, your model learns from the data. You don't have to specify specific rules. The idea is the rules have to be determined from the data itself. You don't have to program those rules into the system. That's the beauty of machine learning, right? And the idea is the more data it goes through the system, the better the model becomes over a period of time. That is why it is machine learning. That's the whole concept of it. So as the process keeps maturing, you keep giving it new data, it matures, and you get better results. Do we have any questions till now? Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned a number of standard tools for modeling. Is there any standard tools or techniques for feature selection? Because it seems like that would be the most important step.
Yeah. So that's a good question. So the question is that we talked about several machine learning algorithms, standard algorithms that exist. Are there tools for feature selection itself? My answer is yes and no, which is a classic answer. Which whenever you don't know the exact answer, that's how you have to answer it. So what I have seen in my experience working with a lot of customers, my experience has primarily been cloud, big data, search, e-commerce, advertising, and risk and fraud management. That many of those algorithms or tools that are allowed for feature. So there is something known as LSA, LDA, things along those lines that do something along those lines. But there is a very important thing. Suppose you are building an application for healthcare. Let's say, for example, you are building a modeling for healthcare. You want to predict, like based on certain elements, whether this person will get sick or not. Let's say this is what you want to predict. I do not have any medical background, right? Even if I do feature selection there using these automated algorithms or tools, it is highly unlikely that I'll get accurate results. The reason is that a lot of areas where we apply machine learning, it's very domain dependent. And hence, you have to have an expert who understands that domain to tell whether this feature is right or wrong. Is this feature right or wrong? So at best, the tools that are available, what they will do, after using those tools, they will rank them that maybe this feature is of higher priority than the other feature. So certain techniques like PSA, LSA, etc. do those kind of things. Yeah, go ahead.
So I was just going to ask you, so, you know, before machine learning is now getting more popularized, you know, sort of decision expert systems of the past, or,
yeah.
You know, how is that different? Is it just a big data component that adds more brute force aspect to machine learning versus, say, actuarians, right?
Yeah, yeah, insurance.
Insurance
Yeah.
company forever,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
recent.
Yeah,
They're trying to
absolutely.
set your policy price and make money.
Yeah.
Right, so that's still trying to come up with the models. So
Absolutely.
how is that different? Is it the brute force, the fact that we now have the capacity to do such data mining to such large scale, that's why it's machine learning, because it's brute force versus specialized algorithms? Is that really the?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. Let me just, for the sake of the audience, let me just reiterate the question here. So gentleman here asked about that traditionally, a lot of insurance companies, banking and financial institutions have been using this credit score system, right? FICO score, you get 750, 300 score, 500 score, have been done for ages, and they were not calling it as machine learning in those days. Why are we calling machine learning it now? What has really changed? So there are multifaceted argument for that. The first thing is, as I initially quoted about, after the advent of this cloud computing, where the computing power is cheap, storage is cheap. So now you have ability to store all this data at a very cheap rate, and you have the computing power to operate on that data, again at a cheap rate. In earlier days, it was still available, but it was prohibitively expensive to do that. That's one part.
So the sampling, so
Yeah.
before you were more relying on sampling, now you
Sampling.
brute force, you
Yeah.
have more data.
Yeah.
That-
So in initial days, you heard a lot of things like normalization and sampling.
Right.
A lot of people used to reduce the data set size and start operating on that. Now you can do that, as well as you can operate on the whole data set size also. That's the second point. The third point also I want to mention here, and there is slight difference here, very slight. So initial days, there was something known as expert systems. So expert systems were nothing but rule-based systems, so if then else. So you would compute the business logic rules, so you used to have all these JVPM, if anyone has worked with that business process engines and workflow engines, you would write all your rules in the workflow, and your software will validate all those rules and operate accordingly, and they can spin off processes and things along those lines. There is slight difference in machine learning from those expert systems. So in expert systems, let me give an example. So if I heard some people here worked in hardware or embedded systems. Who are the people who worked in embedded systems, hardware, anyone? So I also started working in embedded systems initially when I started my career. And one of the key things there in embedded systems and hardware or firmware related systems was that in those systems you used to work with real-time operating system. And in real-time operating system, there was a one general construct that when you do a certain specific process, it has to be deterministic. It cannot be open-ended that if I start a process, it has to complete in a finite amount of time, deterministic amount of time. Whereas on a general purpose operating system, such as let's say Windows or Linux or other kind of systems, you can start a process, it might complete, it might not complete, you cannot tell the time it will take to complete that system. Whereas in an embedded system or a real-time operating system, that was not the case. And in embedded systems, you would see the testing was very, very much required. It cannot happen that one day it will act one way and the other day it will act the separate way, because you have to tape out the chip, and chip has to exactly perform what it is supposed to perform. That was the case of embedded system. Those were the expert systems. On the contrary, machine learning systems are not that. So machine learning systems are not hand-coded rules. These systems, what they do is that given that you have some amount of data, wherein you have some kind of things that have happened in the past. So for instance, if I were to, let's take a home, network-connected home environment. It's a very classic case of Internet of Things. So you have connected devices like you have air conditioning, you have refrigerators, you have your mobile phone, everything in your house, let's say, is connected through Internet of Things. Now, based upon your usage, you want to optimize the bill that you get every month, right? So based upon how you use, what kind of music you hear, what kind of lighting you want to have in your house, what kind of air conditioning temperature you want to have in your house, you want it to be adaptable towards you, as well as you want to optimize the bill that you get after every month. That's it. This is what you want to do. So in an expert system, what would happen is that so a sensor will be an expert system. What it is meant to do is to keep collecting data after every X amount of time. So every second it will keep collecting the thermometer, temperature, etc. And as soon as the thermometer temperature reaches a certain level, it can switch on the air conditioner or switch it off to maintain that threshold that is set. So this is an expert system. Whereas on the contrary, on the machine learning system, what it will do is, it will see what the user's response is. So suppose it shut down the air condition, but user came in and they restarted the air conditioning again. Go ahead.
So you're saying the rules are in the data, meaning
Yes.
they're defined by the data itself. As the
Yes.
data changes, the rules adapt to.
Adapt. Yes, yes.
It's like a variable instead of a constant.
Absolutely. So in the expert case, human beings are the one deciding the rules.
Right.
And that has been encoded as a part of the programming language. And an expert system has to exactly behave as has been stated. It's like the 10 commandments, like
Right.
gospel truth. Whereas even though they may not follow it, but I'm just saying it as an example. However, in machine learning, the rules are discovered from the data. What are the relationships between the data? So data mining, if you will, right? It discovers those rules, applies them, and evaluation part is sometimes the rules that it discovers may not be accurate. And it has to keep updating that to make it much more closer. Do you get that?
If it's a level of abstraction, you still have fixed model,
Yes.
but it's determined, its behavior is determined variably on the data.
Yeah, so the model is actually, so there are two concepts here. So one is the algorithm, the machine learning algorithm. The machine learning algorithm is a software program, it's a computer program. Like I talked about support vector machines, SVM, decision trees, random forest, Bayes naives, Bayesian classifiers, etc., etc. There are tons and several standard implementation of machine learning algorithms. Each of these algorithms use some kind of heuristic technique, be it using decision trees, be it using some kind of regression modeling, etc., using probabilistic distribution, etc., to come out some kind of estimations. Now, and how they come out with these estimations is through what kind of data is fed into the system. So they're very highly dependent upon the data. All they're trying to do is they're trying to do a guesswork. They're trying to associate a probability score to each relationship that they find. So what can happen is if you start giving it a data that is trying to tell something different, it will start giving different kind of probability to it. So the software in the perspective is that it's only going to calculate the probability. And probability will totally depend upon type of data it sees.
Right.
So
It's adaptive.
yes. So if you give it new kind of data, it will adapt and change. In an expert system, there is no room for any change. It is fixed. Machine learning will keep changing all the time. So that's the kind of difference. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So yeah, these are some of the four kind of classifications that happen in a machine learning world. So the first is classification. So the examples that I was quoting is actually known as classification, wherein you have things that you want to predict. You predict the class labels. Then you have clustering. Clustering is mainly when you don't know what those labels might be. So you just have a homogeneous set of data, but you don't know are there some kind of classes that exist within this data? Are there some kind of hotspots in this kind of data? When you have those kind of data, you would use something known as clustering. K-means clustering is very commonly known ways of doing that. Then you have regression. Regression is mostly done with continuous systems, numerical systems. Let's say when I want to predict at what time will the sunrise happen tomorrow, when will the sunset happen. So when I say okay, 8 a.m., this is more like a regression model. Or if I want to predict the stock price, what would be the stock price? Will it increase by 2% or will it decrease by 3%? That could be a regression kind of thing. Dimensionality reduction is more about like if you have several features. I kind of alluded to this example earlier in the conversation, that if you have several parameters features that you can work with, not every parameter will be as important to signal what you really want to predict. That's where you do a dimensional reduction. And it also goes to the question that the other gentleman asked, that are there any kind of tools, etc. So this is one of the techniques, PCA, LDA, LSA, etc. to reduce those number of dimensionality that exists in the data. So can we move on to the next slide, please? Did we talk about, can we move on to the next slide, please? Yeah. So these are some of the ones that I just talked about, the standard algorithms that you may be familiar with, or people kind of tend to use them. And again, there is no, one algorithm is better than other. It all depends upon your scenario, what are you trying to solve, and what are you trying to obtain from it. So there is a lot of hit and trial that you have to apply. Or people who have very good domain experience, can choose a specific algorithm for them and it will work very good for them. In our experience, we saw that random forest generally work very well with the numerical data. So if you have data that does not have any text, anything like that, and you can convert the problem into everything into numerics, floating point numbers are okay. Generally, a random forest will work well, but it generally doesn't work very well with very large data sets. So if you have medium-sized data sets, small data sets, random forest tends to work very well. Stochastic gradient descent, SGD, in the last, as you see, works very well with textual data. So if you have a lot of, let's say, Twitter feed, a lot of text is coming from Twitter, people are doing so. A lot of people use this in sentiment analysis, right? You might have heard about sentiment analysis and all that. There people might use this kind of thing like that. And neural networks nowadays, deep learning, when you have huge amount of data and you want to really train the model to get a lot of information, deep learning and neural networks are something which are commonly being used by a lot of people these days. Can we move on to the next, please? So these are some of the applications where you can see where these machine learning algorithms are used. And basically the x-axis actually shows how many inputs, these are the number of parameters or the dimensions that are there in the data. So as you see the number of dimensions increases, the complexity increases. So think it like a file, flat file. So rows are all the observations of data that you have, columns are all the features that you have in the data. So as you can see, the number of dimension increases, that is the x-axis, it becomes even more complicated. So you can see bioinformatics, OCR, text categorization, machine vision, primarily like one of the persons here was mentioning about speech processing, I think. Those are the things come in the machine vision, video, audio, and things those kind of things, genomics, etc. So all it is trying to tell is that as the idea is as the number of observations increase, this is the training example, it is on the y-axis. Generally it is good. If you have more number of samples, the better model you will be building because you have more number of observations. But if you have more number of features, generally it is good, but it is even more complex to understand that. So that's a kind of trade-off we all have to think in mind. That's where you use dimensionality reduction. But you don't tend to reduce the number of examples. You want more examples to get a better data. So that's some example. We move on to the next. Just an example of what I showed, it is showed differently, like how a general machine learning process works. The first is the training, it is a supervised machine learning. First is that you show it some of the examples that have occurred in the past. You have a training data set, you do feature extraction, build a classifier, and get a classifier, and then you have the validation process. And then you validate whatever the results that were there. And the last thing that you see is the prediction part of it. That says how many times you were correct, how many times you were wrong. So it is also known as confusion matrix. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Yeah, so it's a simple example of a binary classifier. You can think it as a plane. What a binary classifier does is that it's like a yes or no answer. So it just kind of draws a plane and says anything that is above this plane is yes, anything below this plane is no. Or it could be true or false, it could be 1 or 0, something along those lines. So very simple mathematical representation of how a classifier would work. So this is a binary classifier. This is just showing that can you move on to the next slide, please? Yeah, so this is a confusion matrix. A confusion matrix is T, so T nominates true, P is positive, true positive, false negative, false positive, true negative. So it's just that when you, this is the output of a evaluation. Once you evaluate a model, this is what it throws out, and it is known as the confusion matrix. And the way you detect the accuracy of a model is by 4 parameters: precision, sensitivity, accuracy, and recall. So those are some of the things. Can we move on to the next one, please? I'm sure there are plenty of more slides. In the essence of time, I'll cut short my presentation here. But I'm happy to answer any question if you have any. We talked about a cloud, we talked about big data, we talked about Internet of Things, how we collect the data from all these different sources. We talked about, initially it was more about just collecting the data. I talked about descriptive analysis, prescriptive analysis, and going forward with predictive analysis. Machine learning is primarily used in the prescriptive and the predictive side of the things. Descriptives are more about just summing, aggregation. Yeah, go ahead.
What are some of the most interesting applications you can think of offhand? What are some of the most interesting applications you can think of offhand for specifically Internet of Things for machine learning?
Sure. Very good question. So how many people are aware of Nest, that a company that Google acquired? People are aware of it? Okay, great. I'll give an example of Nest. So basically what Nest does is that it collects data about all the equipment that you have in your home, like the intensity of the light, the room temperature that you may have, and things along those lines. So it starts collecting those kind of data. Now think of a futuristic, now I'm talking a little bit on the futuristic side of things. Why Google acquired Nest? So Google wants to get into Internet of Things. They already have data about you. You do a lot of Google searches, you go and visit on the websites, etc. And how does big data, cloud, and all those things kind of tie in together? I'm just going to give that example. So Nest collects data about your physical things in your home. This data was never available to Google because when you went on to Google or did any kind of search, they never knew like what kind of temperature was there in your home or any of those kind of things. Now they will have access to that. Okay, that's one part of thing. You would see that whenever Google does advertising, so whenever you do some kind of search on internet, they make money through it. Everything else in Google is pretty much free, right? Android operating system, everything is free. But it's a very profitable company, right? All they do is they enrich their advertising. So they try to make the ads very, very much relevant to you. There was a study done by Facebook most recently wherein they said based upon the type of advertisement they'll show you, they can alter your mood. Right. There was a study, I think he mentioned about political situations of like political kind of and snooping and other kind of like debates around this. There was a lot of big debate about it. So what they were trying to do is that, suppose if I'm a person who is a little bit, let's say I was fired from my company, okay? So I'm in a kind of low state of mind and I go onto a website and then I see an ad that kind of tries to, extract that, tries to utilize my situation to sell me something or, there is a motivational lesson going on somewhere, people who are low, something like that. And I click on that ad and signs up for that. Because I'm right now, if I were all good, I would have never clicked that and signed up for that course or something like that. But now they really understood my situation and they showed me that ad. So they are making sale, you see, based upon the mood that I have. And they also did a study wherein they said that how they show you the actual stories. So if you start seeing stories that people are dying of hunger in Africa, or they immediately start seeing such kind of posts, you'll start seeing that your mood starts becoming kind of a little bit different. So those kind of things they're able to detect. And when Google collects a lot of this information from your home, the physiological environment that you are in, like your room temperature, what time of the day it is, etc. And then they club with the data about what searches you have made, what your interests are. That data becomes very, very immense. They can do a lot more predictions in what kind of ads they can show. Does it make sense? It's a little bit futuristic, but that they can do with this kind of data. Yeah, go ahead.
The thing is, it seems like it minimizes Internet of Things and maximizes the machine learning part. Because Internet of Things seems like just a bunch of new data coming in through sensors
Different sources.
that are in it just data.
Yeah.
Like we have logs and we have but because they relate to the physical world, they add a new dimension. Whereas
Absolutely.
before was computer data, website data.
Yes.
Now it's your
Physical data.
Physical data. But in terms of, it's really just data
Yes.
in mass scale.
In mass scale. Yes.
But it's the interesting part is not in the gathering of data.
Yes.
Is
How do you apply it?
How you apply it. That's really machine learning.
That's what my company is, actionable analytics. It's about what kind of action.
That's where the
actions-
interest is.
Yes, yes.
Data
What
is
do
just
you-
data.
Yes, yes.
What do you do with it? Now the thing is, how do you take the new data that's coming from the physical world to make meaningful applications?
Before I complete, I'll just give one more example here. That when you collect all this data from all these sensors, let's say mobile phone, so all of us have mobile phones. Mobile phones collect our location data, right, all the time, wherever we are moving, right? Given that we have this location data, time of the day, we know what is the time of the day based upon the location I am having. and based upon my past things like what are the places I have visited, what kind of things I like, my interest and all, and suppose they start recommending me, don't take this direction, go to from this route, because they know that at this point of time I'm going to go to this route. Or if you're passing through a restaurant and they know you are a vegan or this is a specialty, immediately a highlight comes onto your phone saying that, hey, you're passing through this thing, there is a sale going on there, it's a happy hour, $5 thing.